I can safely say that this week's episode of Noblesse was the most serious and plot-driven out of the four so far. Don't get me wrong, I've really enjoyed Noblesse up until this point. In fact, up until this point, I would have said that the main focus is clearly on the more slice-of-life aspects, and I was down for that. You didn't even have to have a serious plot, and I would have been entertained because the idea of vampire-like creatures and just Frankenstein and all these other supernatural elements just interacting with seemingly normal high school, it entertains me greatly. But this episode really feels more in line with the OVA Awakening, where it is pretty much non-stop drama-filled, and even the more downtime moments of the episode, I would argue, are still kind of sinister when you have two separate sides, one with Tao and one with Takeo, and they're bonding with our friends that we've kind of come to know and love, and it feels so wholesome, but at the end of the day you also remember what side they're fighting on, and our main man is not really a fan of them, especially considering they're a part of the side that kidnapped M-21 and are torturing him just for his information. So it was very interesting watching this episode, and I think it was an episode that's probably best described as it has personality. And personality's been something that I feel like has been there, but I can see why other people may have found it to be dry or maybe not as gripping, because the characters, they just feel like this is what they are. If you enjoy that, you're going to really like the show. If you don't enjoy that, there's nothing here for you. But this episode, it felt like by separating them and giving them that bit of humility, that bit of humanity, just having simple moments where it looks like someone's getting beat up in the alleyway and our man comes in to rush in and save the day. And what ends up happening is it just so happens to be one of the people who were like, oh, this is clearly a bad person. Yeah, he's looking for his sister, but at the end of the day, I mean, can we really trust this organization? Absolutely not. And then you get this moment where you can tell it's fake from his side, but at the same time, you're kind of thinking, or at least I know I was, what if that's actually how he wants to be, but can't because of his organization? What if he's a part of this organization simply to try to find his sister, and maybe he's not actually that bad of a guy? And as the episode gets going, you really do look at Takeo as being like, okay, he doesn't seem evil. He doesn't seem like this horrible shark-looking bastard who is pure chaos and deserves a right kick in the ass and maybe to be put down underground, to be honest. At the end of the day, watching him in this episode, which was one of my personal favorite points of this episode and definitely one of my more intriguing characters of Noblesse for sure, Takeo is someone who feels like he's definitely on a side that's not good, but at the same time, it feels like he's not a bad person. Fear might be the deciding motivator for him. I quite like that about this episode, because seeing him interact with a normal person who's just, you know, from his point of view, on a date, and he thinks it's cute, and of course his date's saying it's not a date. It's that classic high school shenanigans nonsense, but it was just wholesome despite it being an antagonist. And that's what I love, because then when you get the later portion of the episode where you have, once again, another torture scene with M-21. M-21's got a great plan that I really do love, I have to say, and we'll touch upon it in a bit. But at the end of the day, just watching him be very much against torture, he's the reason he has food and water, and then you just see like, you know what, I'm going to kill you. And then we see a snapping moment, which I have to say is probably my personal favorite Noblesse moment to date, outside of the OVA, because the OVA is still, I think, a step above everything we've seen so far, and that's no surprise. The OVA kind of did condense an entire seasons of the manhwa's content, so it probably was all the best moments rather than kind of the slower pace and things like that. But I really like the moment where he pulls a gun on this guy and he's threatening to kill him, and you have to have Tao just kind of come in and try to stop him, and he's just bragging about how he's a good guy. That the people that he's ordered to kill, he doesn't always kill. If it's a mother or a child, things like that, he lets them live. And he's telling him that I made sure all of those people you left alive, they did die, and you bet your ass they suffered. And I'm like, I had such emotions during the scene. This is a character who deserves all the death, and someone who feels like you could easily see him join on a more righteous side, given the opportunity and the motivation to do so. And that's what I really like about that dynamic for sure. And then Tao is a character who is his master hacker. He had a lot of charisma, I have to say, even before we really got introduced to him. Just the idea of him hacking and having fun going up against another seemingly normal character. And the fact that they had this little like bonding day, I thought was adorably hilarious and weird, because I was like, this is someone, once again, I would think is an evil scumbag up with an organization so he can break the law and hack. And it seems like he really does enjoy hacking, and that probably is his motivator to work for them, not necessarily for their ideals, but probably because he wants to go up against master security and to find someone, a normal student, who is actually able to give him a challenge, not something he feels like can beat him, but given the opportunity and motivation, maybe he could. And it was nice to see that, because for the first time, it felt like the mask came off and this is who he wanted to be, But once again, similar to Takeo, he couldn't because of the organization and the beliefs that are drilled into them. And I really like that, and you can definitely tell there's this kind of like bromance going on between the two. And I think that'd be interesting to explore further if they both do stay alive, and seemingly so far they are, and I really hope we get to see more moments between both of them, but most importantly, their two friends that they made along the way of getting back to doing their torturing mission. And that's what I really like about this episode, is it felt like rather than putting the focus just on new characters who are going to be goofy or they're going to have a stone cold face, you gave them a very good personality, something to bounce off of, and by introducing them to the most opposite characters you think they would interact with, and then getting more bonding moments, more kind of heartwarming moments, it feels like, more bittersweet heartwarming between the two. It really did bring it out in a very interesting way, and M21's plan of saying like, I'll give you the information, but first you have to give me the information I'm looking for. It's crystal clear he has no interest in giving them the information, and if he does, he'll probably give them lies. But at the end of the day, it's a good plan from his point of view, and the fact that there was some people in this group who were like willing to work with him, it makes sense why he would let his guard down a little bit. But then when you see this shark-looking bastard, it's hard to say if this plan's going to work at all, especially considering the higher-ups are saying that like this guy's going to die once we get our information. It's hard to say where you want to go with it. There was very little downtime, simple moments in the traditional sense of what we're used to with Noblesse. The most we got is a couple of moments with Frankenstein and just the idea of like making dinner, or just the characters talking about how like, oh, of course we got invited by the headmaster because we had such fun, as we look at an image of clearly Frankenstein being quite disappointed. I definitely will say, in terms of the action at the end of the episode, I thought it was pretty crazy. I mean, we're seeing stranger danger form, and I'm like, okay, this looks like he's about to get diddled. And then turning the tides I thought was great, because you are supposed to think that his race is very powerful, and even though they were using some form of experimental drug, I would have the feeling that characters like Rizel and all of them are part of this species that are really, really powerful, the guardians of humanity who are no longer really needed. It's nice that he was completely able to wipe the floor with them in a pretty beautiful and brutal fashion, and if it wasn't for hostages, they would have ended up dead, I'm pretty sure. At the end of the day, though, it's interesting how the antagonists and enemies, they aren't solely winning based on brute strength. They are using emotional warfare, which I think is a good tactic, especially considering what we've seen from their side. They're not afraid of killing mothers and children. It makes sense that they would use innocent high schoolers as bait in order to get these people to drop their guard. And I think when they do drop their guard, it really does let you understand how they personally feel about this whole situation. Even if their words are saying they don't care, clearly their actions are saying otherwise. I can understand why this may not be everyone's like top pick of the season or something that hooks them right away, and I'm a firm believer you should never force yourself to watch anything if you don't enjoy it in some way, shape, and form. But for me, Noblesse is continuing to honestly get better. I was fine with the formula they had through episodes 1 through 3, but having an episode very similar to Awakening gives me a lot of hope for the main story going forward, and source material readers have told me that the story is really good when it gets into it, so as long as it entertains me in between the main story episodes such as this, I'm going to continue watching and reviewing it for sure. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on this week's episode. What was your personal favorite moment, and out of the two antagonists, which one would you personally say is your current favorite? If you enjoyed the video, of course, I'd like to share your support and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.